Hello guys, last week on this channel I had a video about Laravel 10.1 and about return types in collections, which Taylor decided to remove to avoid any conflicts. Rightfully so. But a few people in that discussion on that pull request on Twitter and on my YouTube channel suggested that maybe we can have that as part of artisan command. So make controller and then provide the return type. And I tried to make that pull request, but people on that pull request finally convinced me that it's a pretty bad idea. But just in case, for the context, I will show you. So I suggested to have something like this, make controller with return type, with options like response, JSON, view, and inertia. And people downvoted it heavily, and then a few people took the time to comment why, and I will link that in the description below so you can read the arguments against such make controller flag. So instead, I decided to shoot this video and teach some of you who maybe don't know how to edit the stubs, the default stubs, so you could edit those return types, whichever you want, manually for all the project. So here I have a totally fresh Laravel project, and if I just run, for example, PHP artisan make controller user controller, for example, let it be resource, and for the API, for example, and let's open that user controller, what would be the result? The methods which don't return anything, which is fine. But maybe you use API controllers, for example, with eloquent API resources. So you would generate the resource, for example, PHP artisan make resource user resource, and then in controller you would do something like this, return user resource collection from user all or user paginate, just to avoid too much data, something like this. And then that user resource collection returns what? PHP Storm will suggest us anonymous resource collection. So we would do something like anonymous resource collection, which would be added automatically by my PHP Storm here. Wouldn't it be cool to have specific API controller like a draft, which would be used for all the API controllers you would generate in the future? Let's do exactly that with stubs. So first thing what we'll do is publish those stubs, PHP artisan stub publish. It will publish the files from the Laravel framework core into a specific folder called stubs, with a lot of stubs for commands like make controller, make factory, make middleware, and others. So you can browse around those, and we're specifically interested in controller model API stub, which is exactly for our case, resource controller with API, which would use also the model. And there are variables here which we can use not only for model itself, but as a part of other strings, which is exactly what I did in my experiment. And now I will paste from my notes the actual stub that I suggest for controllers with API resources. So 1, 2, 3, paste, and this is the structure. So index returns anonymous resource collection, which is added here on top. And then we replace a lot of stuff with model. For example, model is the word part from model resource or model paginate here. For example, in the store, model is part of resource class as well. Also, model create here. And then method by method, I use the same variables of show model and also return JSON resource, for example, which is a default return type for the model resource class for the Eloquent API resource class. Similarly, update method and destroy method. For the destroy, I personally prefer to return response no content, which means literally no content with 204 status code. And this has the type of response, which is also added to the top here. Now, when we have this stub, what we can do in the terminal, we can do PHP artisan make, actually not even controller, let's start earlier from the model. You will see some more magic if you haven't seen that before. So make model task, for example, with migration, with controller. Controller should be resourceful. Also, we need to generate form requests for validation. And I was, by the way, the author of that pull request in Laravel 8 point something, I don't remember. And also specify API. It is all generated, and now if we open that task controller, as you can see, everything is generated like we planned. Task resource is the only thing underlined because that doesn't exist. Unfortunately, there's no flag for make controller or make model with eloquent API resource because the resource as a word already is reserved for resourceful controllers. So we need to do that manually. So PHP artisan make resource task resource class, and then PHP Storm wouldn't underline that anymore because that class already exists here. So as you can see, nothing is underlined except for weird eloquent stuff, which is kind of a magic method like task paginate and task create. Everything else is generated exactly like in our stub, which is the stub that I suggest personally if you use Eloquent API resources. You can get creative with your own stubs, it's totally up to you. And that's the whole point of that discussion of what controller should return. It's totally personal preference. And there are so many options that as a community we didn't agree on some set of possible solutions that would fit everyone. Another similar question that would not fit everyone is this one. In the course of how to structure Laravel projects, I tried to list all the options where the logic of the project should be. If not in controller, then where? So basically we will move stuff from controller to stuff like services, traits, actions, and others. So I recommend that course. It comes as a part of Laravel Daily Com membership, so subscribe to monthly or yearly membership, and see you guys in other videos.